Welcome to AMS Talks the Value of Data. My name is Rick Bacon and I'm the Chief Executive of Aqua Metrology Systems. And I'm very pleased to have on our show today Gail Heath, who is Research Professor at the University of Arizona and also Chief Operating Officer of Sub Rosa Monitoring. And Sub Rosa is based in Arizona and is dedicated to detecting, monitoring, modeling a range of aqueous matrices in the mining, oil and gas, nuclear and pipeline industries. Welcome, Gail. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure.
So today we're going to be talking about the importance of trace metal monitoring in the mining industry and the role of real-time data. Gail, with Sub Rosa Monitoring, you've developed a unique approach to water quality monitoring, and maybe in the mining industry, and maybe you could share some of that approach with our viewers today.
Sure. One of the differences on the approach that I've been working on developing for a long time is the basic philosophy behind what we're doing. And really what that is to provide real-time or near real-time information that project engineers and management can base decisions on. Also, when you have good data to base your decisions, it reduces your risk tolerances and things like that. And so it's a win-win in a lot of ways. Another thing that's really important in the mining industry is social license type issues. And real-time data for multiple parameters goes a long way to help people understand what you're doing, what the results of what you're doing are, and that you're actively taking roles in to minimize the impacts of your activities. And so that goes a long ways to make people feel good about your project and want to support it. But to get back to the monitoring philosophy, that's really kind of what it is we're looking at accomplishing. And the way we accomplish that is through an integrated multi-sensor design. That means we have a bunch of sensors looking at the system as a whole in different ways, and not just looking at pore pressure in the rocks, for example, or pH of the water, or ion concentration of certain metals. We want to look at the system as a whole, so we understand what the geochemistry is doing. We understand when there's inputs to the system, what the results of those inputs are going to be. Like, for example, if it rains hard for a long time, or if it rains just a little sprinkle over a longer period of time, how does that impact what you're doing? And these types of systems go a long way to help you understand that. And if you can't understand what's going on in your site, then you really can't manage it at all. And so that's really the idea.
That's great, because I think what you've described is quite a complex systems approach, but you're actually dealing with a complex system, right, with multiple parameters, and you need these multiple data points in order to really understand what's going on. My sense is, from our perspective, that the mining industry has been quite slow to adopt this approach. Is that your perspective? And if so, have you got any sense of why that might be?
Well, there's a couple issues here. One is, like you mentioned in the introduction, the mining industry is dealing with a very difficult set of scenarios. To really get a good handle on what's going on in your site, you have to do a pretty good job of monitoring multiple aspects. Mm-hmm. And in the case of open pit mining, like we have here in Arizona, that covers an area of tens to hundreds of square miles, and so the costs add up pretty dramatically. So it's a big scaling issue. So you need to be very clever on how you approach it, how you use the data, and what kind of decisions that you can reliably make from that data. So in the past, the big driving cause for monitoring was permit compliance. That has actually changed in the last 5 to 6 years. Instead of having that as the driver, the social license attitudes of companies have changed to where that's the most important. So the driving feature of a lot of these is the social license and risk reduction. And so there's been a lot of work in the last 5 years or so to get that accomplished. And so you see more and more companies looking at these types of systems because they're very cost effective. You get really good data in a very usable fashion. And if your engineer leaves, you still have access to the data, which in the past, most mining companies gave their data to their consulting companies. And you see that as a huge cultural change in those companies now, to where they realize the value of that data, and they have recognized the need for them to have it in-house in some kind of repository that anyone has access to that needs it. And so a lot of the work I've done has been kind of looking at integrating the approach and then handling the data management and stuff as well. You see, in the past, mining companies have done very good in this area as far as fleet management in the mine, like where the trucks are going, how the shovels are running, those kinds of things. And they finally recognized the value of moving that into the environmental sector as well. And you see it's happening more and more now.
That's an interesting parallel, fleet management, and yet, the biggest thing that they're about right is mining, and that, and the consequences of it is sort of the last thing to the dance. One of the questions I always get asked, I get asked by my investors, so I'm going to ask you the same question, is where does this go, right? What do you see the future of this sort of online monitoring in the approach you're taking, this very comprehensive approach? Do you see that being more widespread?
Well, it's starting to happen now. So yes, I think in the near term, I would say in 10 years or less, that the majority of all mining companies worldwide will have their environmental data handled in this way. They'll integrate it together. Instead of using, like I mentioned earlier, instead of using just 1 or 2 data points, they'll use volumetric methods in association with point source methods. So you get a good feel of everything that's going on with the geochemistry, the site, the geomechanical properties of what's going on. Where's the water, where is it going, how fast is it getting there, and integrate that into one system so you can start making a story of the data. One of the big issues that you've seen in the past is that these mining companies have spent tons of millions of dollars on collecting this data a year, and then it's just data, and so it's really not usable. So I think the big thing that I've seen and that I've been working on quite a bit is to get that data into a usable format. So it's information, not data. And so I think that's where everything's going, is integrated packages that produce information that people can use without having a huge amount of talent in that particular area, for example.
But it's actionable data, and I think particularly relevant in this sort of pressure. You mentioned social license, but it's the whole sustainability, right? Sustainability leadership.
Right.
As you say, their footprint is very, very significant, and the outfall of it is also significant if the canary in the mine isn't there, literally. So,
well, one of the big issues that we've had in the mining business, you asked where things are going, and I think in the last couple of years, the major research work and concern is the highest risk of mining is the tailings storage facilities.
Right.
And when you have a failure in one of those, like the one in Brazil a couple of years ago, killed like almost 300 people, and it's going to cost the company probably close to $40 or $50 billion time it's all done. And so, that's not just a social license issue. It's a catastrophic offense. The one thing about mining, the mining industry, that's different than almost any other industry, and that is that the public sees the industry as a single entity, and globally is the same as locally. So anything that happens for any company anywhere in the world in the mining business, that reputation gets transferred to every other mining company. Right. And so one of the issues that you see that mining companies are starting to do is join these collaborative efforts to start having the same types of suggestions on how to monitor and manage things like tailings, for example. That's become a huge global effort. They produced documentation for suggestions on how to manage those this year.
Right.
Actually last summer, so it's been like 6 months ago. And a lot of the mining companies actually did that on their own. And what that is putting worldwide the same infrastructure requirements that you have in the first world countries. And so the mining companies have done this on their own to help tide off the social license issue that they've been facing because of what happens in countries that have no regulatory restrictions for those kinds of developments.
Very good. Well, it's sort of best practice, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, it's that very informative, very interesting perspective. Thank you so much for sharing those insights. Really appreciate it. And I look forward to the next mining conference when we can get together again.
Yes, always fun.
Yeah, whenever that is. Thanks very much indeed, Gail. It's great talking to you.
Yeah, my pleasure.